Some days meditation will feel easy. On others, it might feel difficult. The trick is to gently stay with it each time, no matter how it feels. Look for a place in your routine where this exercise can slot in easily. Research shows it's easier to create a new habit when we do it at about the same time each day. We recommend doing it first thing in the morning, but you might need to be flexible with that. Find somewhere you won't be disturbed. Don't worry too much about background noise. I'll explain how to deal with that, but it might be easier at first if you have some peace and quiet. Make sure you're sitting comfortably before you start. Unless you're used to sitting cross-legged on the floor, I'd recommend using a chair. Sit with your legs and arms uncrossed, feet flat on the floor, and hands resting in your lap or on your legs. Try to keep your back straight, but not too tense. It's important that our good intentions if you need it, a small cushion or a rolled-up towel under your backside. In fact, there's a really funny old story about a very impatient yogi meditating in his cave. Wondering what the yogi was up to, a traveller passing by asked him, excuse me, do you mind if I stop in? The yogi, being very disciplined, kept his eyes shut and continued without saying a word. Thinking the yogi must be a little hard of hearing, the traveller said a little louder, excuse me, do you mind if I come in? Eventually the yogi opened his eyes and said, can't you see? I'm trying to meditate. Apologising, the woman went on her way. But she hadn't got very far before she started to think, I wonder what kind of meditation he's doing. So she returned to find the yogi sitting in quiet contemplation. Excuse me, she asked, what sort of meditation is this? The yogi, letting out a big sigh, said, I'm meditating on patience. The woman said, oh, okay, interesting, thanks, and left once again. So the yogi returned to his meditation. As the woman continued her journey, she found herself thinking, wow, patience. I could really do with some of that. I wonder if I should ask him for some instruction. So once more she went back to the yogi's cave. But so infuriated by all the interruptions, this time the yogi jumped up and screaming and shouting chased the traveller out of the cave. Clearly, training the mind is about much more than sitting still with our eyes closed. It's about bringing a gentle and flexible approach to our practice, and as a consequence, into the world around us. The conditions may not always be easy, but the journey's about embracing them, making these so-called obstacles part of our practice. The practice of resting the mind in awareness, at ease with ourselves and at ease with the world around us. We might not know how to react. Noting gives us some very clear direction, perhaps a greater sense of clarity and confidence. In that moment, we pause and identify the nature of distraction. Oh yeah, thinking, or oh, feeling. Having noted, there's a sense of having dealt with it. This makes it easier to let go of the distraction and gently return to the object of focus. And when it happens again, which it will, we simply apply the same approach, gently noting the nature of the distraction. Now, when we begin noting, the temptation is to try and catch every single thought and feeling, but that quickly becomes tiring. We only need note the distraction when we realize that we've been lost in thought, and even then, it's a very gentle acknowledgement. Imagine it a little less like whack-a-mole and a little more like a feather, softly being placed on a fine crystal glass. So noting is when we recognize the mind has wandered. We acknowledge it, gently note the nature of distraction, let it go, and then effortlessly return to the object of focus. Confidence is a funny thing. People sometimes assume it's about repeating a story in the mind over and over again. One that makes us look or feel really good. But the problem is, when we have an artificial confidence like this, it's always tinged with fear. What happens if it lets us down? What happens if we lose the storyline? What happens if doubt creeps in, that feeling of, am I living the right way? But there's a kind of confidence, you could call it quiet confidence, that's almost the opposite. It means letting go of all that stuff, putting down the old storylines. And when we let go of it, we experience something else. We experience vulnerability, uncertainty, and openness. But within that, somewhere, we discover quiet confidence. Perhaps it's just a byproduct of being willing to exist without those comforting stories. But the incredible thing is, because it's not separate from ourselves, we can't lose it. It's indestructible, and that's the beauty of it. To rest with that sense of vulnerability,
The more effort we put in,
not necessarily
the more we'll
knowing,
get out of life.
but at the same
But
time...
of course, this isn't always true. Take falling asleep, for example. You can prepare in the right way, put yourself in the right position, and get yourself comfortable. But after that, well, you can't force it to happen, right? In fact, it works exactly the other way around. The harder you try, the less sleepy you become. It's only when we stop trying that we finally let go and drift off. And before we know it, we're waking up the next morning feeling refreshed, relaxed, after a good night's sleep. And it's a very similar story when we're training the mind. I think a nice metaphor for this is the idea of taming a wild horse. If you look at how a wild horse is tamed, rather than pinning it down in one place, the horse is led out on a very long rope and put in a big open spacious field. The horse runs around feeling like it's got all the space in the world. But very slowly, the rope's pulled in, and the horse adjusts to this feeling until it comes to a natural place of rest. And we're looking to do just the same thing with the mind in meditation. Not trying to pin it down in one place, but bringing it to a natural place of rest. So let go of any idea of needing to achieve something or get somewhere, and
It's
instead
sometimes called
enjoy the
the
opportunity
dark side
to
of the
sit back,
mind.
relax, and be present.
These are the thoughts and fantasies that we'd rather didn't appear in the mind. Whether they're exciting, violent, vengeful, or maybe even sadistic in nature. We might think we shouldn't be experiencing them. But these thoughts are perfectly natural, and there's obviously no need to act on them. But why do they seem to appear more often once we begin to meditate? Well, typically, we go through our day with quite a heavy filter on the mind, blocking out these thoughts that we don't like, either habitually or intentionally. When we block them out habitually, we're unaware that it's even taking place. We're just so caught up in our day-to-day thinking. But by meditating, we're creating more space in the mind. So it's not that there are more of these thoughts, we just see them more clearly. But when we're blocking them out intentionally, we already see the thoughts clearly, but we're resisting them, perhaps fearful of what they say about us as a person. But what meditation shows us is that we're not our thoughts. So there's no need to judge them, to identify with them. We see that they don't make us a mean person, a terrible person, a twisted person. And it's through this process that we discover peace of mind,
When you chase
allowing
after
thoughts to come
happiness,
and go,
It seems so
at ease with
elusive.
the mind.
I think most of us do it, most of the time. There's an idea that happiness exists somewhere else. Not in this moment, maybe in another place, or it's with another person, just doing something different. When we chase after happiness as a movement, it's away from the present moment to another place, to some time other than now. And because we move away from the present moment, ironically, we move further away from happiness. Because when you think about it, happiness can only exist in this moment, right here, right now. Now, the interesting thing is that when we focus less on chasing our own happiness, and instead focus more on the happiness of others, we immediately find ourselves in the present moment. So not only are we benefiting others by having a more open, empathetic mind, but we're also benefiting ourselves by being more present and experiencing more happiness. So the quickest way, the surest way of experiencing more happiness in our lives is to focus more on the happiness of others.